Romeo and Juliet is one of the most famous plays written by William Shakespeare. It is a tragedy, which means it is a story that ends in sadness and death. But it is also a love story, one that shows how powerful love can be, even when it leads to destruction. Shakespeare wrote the play around the year 1595. It was one of his early tragedies and remains one of the most widely performed plays in the world. This video covers summary, characters, themes, and analysis of Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. The play tells the story of two young lovers, Romeo and Juliet, who belong to two noble families in the city of Verona, Italy. These families, the Montagues and the Capulets, have been enemies for a long time. Their hatred is so deep that it affects everyone around them. But Romeo and Juliet fall in love despite this hatred, and their secret love leads to tragedy. The play explores many universal themes such as love, fate, family, conflict, and death. Shakespeare wrote in rich poetic language, using rhythm, metaphor, and symbolism. Every line has meaning, and every scene builds toward the final tragedy. Summary of Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. The play begins with a section called the prologue. A prologue means an introduction that gives the audience a preview of what will happen. It is spoken by a character called the chorus. The chorus tells us that this is a story about two star-crossed lovers. The phrase star-crossed means their love is doomed by fate. Their destiny is written in the stars, and it will end in death. The chorus also says that their death will finally bring peace to their fighting families. This prologue reveals the tragic outcome before the story begins. It prepares the audience for what is to come. Shakespeare uses this device to make us focus not on what will happen but on how it will happen. Act 1 opens with a street fight between servants of the Montague and Capulet families. This fight shows how deep and senseless the hatred has become. Even the servants are ready to fight for their master's honor. Soon, Benvolio, who is a cousin of Romeo, tries to stop the fight, but Tybalt, a fiery Capulet, enters and makes the situation worse. The fight grows until Prince Aeschylus, the ruler of Verona, arrives and commands peace. He declares that if anyone disturbs the peace again, they will be punished with death. After the fight, we meet Romeo. He is in a sad mood. His cousin Benvolio asks him what is wrong, and Romeo says he is in love with a woman named Rosalind, but she does not love him back. His sadness shows his romantic nature and his deep emotions. Meanwhile, the Capulets are planning a grand ball, or party, that same evening. Juliet's father, Lord Capulet, wants her to meet a young nobleman named Paris, who wishes to marry her. Juliet is only 13 years old. She agrees to meet Paris, but says she has not thought much about marriage. Romeo and Benvolio decide to attend the Capulet ball in disguise. They hope that Romeo will forget Rosalind when he sees other women. When Romeo enters the party, he sees Juliet for the first time. In that moment, he forgets Rosalind completely. He is amazed by Juliet's beauty and says she teaches the torches to burn bright. Juliet also feels an instant attraction toward Romeo. They speak in a shared sonnet. This poetic exchange shows their deep connection from the beginning. However, they soon discover that they belong to rival families. Romeo is a Montague, and Juliet is a Capulet. This discovery shocks them, but their feelings remain strong. Thus, Act 1 sets the stage for love born in the middle of hatred. Act 2 begins with one of the most famous scenes in world literature, the balcony scene. After the ball, Romeo secretly goes to the Capulet orchard and hides below Juliet's balcony. Juliet appears above, speaking to herself. She does not know Romeo is there. She says, "O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" The word wherefore here means why. She is asking why he must be Romeo, a Montague, the son of her family's enemy. Romeo hears her words and comes out of hiding. The two confess their love for each other. They agree that their love is true, and they decide to marry secretly. The balcony scene is important because it shows the purity of their emotions. It also shows how love gives them courage to defy family rules. The next day, Romeo goes to Friar Lawrence, a kind priest. He asks him to marry them. Friar Lawrence is surprised at first because Romeo loved Rosalind only a day ago. But he agrees to help, hoping that this marriage might bring peace between the two families. Romeo and Juliet marry secretly with Friar Lawrence's help. Their wedding is private, and no one except the nurse and the friar knows about it. Their love is now joined, but danger still surrounds them. Act 3 is the turning point of the play. Everything changes here. The scene begins with Mercutio, Romeo's witty and humorous friend, meeting Tybalt in the street. Tybalt is angry because Romeo attended the Capulet ball uninvited. He challenges Romeo to a duel. Romeo refuses to fight because now Tybalt is secretly his relative through marriage to Juliet. Mercutio, however, mocks Tybalt and draws his sword. They fight, and Tybalt kills Mercutio. Romeo is filled with rage and guilt. Forgetting Friar Lawrence's advice to stay calm, he attacks Tybalt and kills him. This act of revenge is Romeo's tragic mistake, or hamartia. In literature, hamartia means a fatal flaw or error in judgment that leads to a hero's downfall. Romeo's impulsive nature, acting before thinking, brings disaster. The prince arrives and decides not to execute Romeo but to banish him from Verona. Banishment means he must leave the city forever. For Romeo, this is worse than death because it separates him from Juliet. When Juliet hears the news, she feels torn. Tybalt, her cousin, is dead, but her husband Romeo killed him. Her love for Romeo wins, and she longs to see him again before he leaves. Friar Lawrence arranges for them to spend one last night together. They meet secretly, say goodbye with tears, and Romeo leaves for Mantua. This act ends with separation and sorrow. In Act 4, the tragedy deepens. Juliet's parents know nothing of her secret marriage. They decide she must marry Paris in 2 days. Juliet refuses, but her father becomes furious. He says if she disobeys, he will throw her out of the house. Desperate, Juliet goes to Friar Lawrence for help. The friar gives her a risky plan. He gives her a potion that will make her appear dead for 42 hours. Her family will believe she has died, and she will be placed in the Capulet tomb. After she awakens, Romeo will come secretly from Mantua, and they will escape together. Juliet drinks the potion that night. The next morning, her family finds her seemingly lifeless. There is great grief in the Capulet house. The wedding is turned into a funeral. The final act brings the tragic ending. Friar Lawrence sends Friar John to deliver a letter to Romeo in Mantua. The letter explains Juliet's fake death and the plan for their reunion. However, Friar John is delayed because the authorities quarantine him, fearing that he might carry the plague. As a result, the letter never reaches Romeo. Meanwhile, Romeo's servant Balthasar arrives from Verona and tells Romeo that Juliet has died. Balthasar does not know the plan, so his message is honest but incomplete. Romeo, believing Juliet is truly dead, rushes back to Verona without waiting for any further explanation. Heartbroken, Romeo buys poison from an apothecary, a drug seller. He returns to Verona to see Juliet one last time. He enters the tomb where Juliet lies, still in her death-like sleep. There he meets Paris, who has come to mourn Juliet. They fight, and Romeo kills Paris. Then Romeo drinks the poison and dies beside Juliet. Moments later, Juliet awakens and sees Romeo dead. She kisses him, hoping to die from the poison on his lips, but it does not work. So she takes his dagger and kills herself. When the families arrive, they find the two young lovers dead. Friar Lawrence explains everything. The prince blames both families for their hatred. Finally, Lord Montague and Lord Capulet agree to end their feud. They promise to build statues of Romeo and Juliet in gold, to remember their love and their deaths. But it is too late. Peace has come only after tragedy. Setting and context of Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. The play takes place in Verona, a city in northern Italy, during the Renaissance period. The Renaissance was a time of great cultural change in Europe. People valued honor, reputation, and family pride. In this society, marriage was often arranged by parents. Love was rarely considered more important than family duty. This context explains why Romeo and Juliet's love is seen as rebellious. The story of two lovers from feuding families was not new. Shakespeare adapted it from earlier Italian tales. But he transformed the story through his poetic language and his deep understanding of human emotion. His version became the most famous because it captures both the beauty and the pain of love. Character analysis of Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. Romeo is emotional, passionate, and impulsive. He loves deeply but acts quickly without thinking of consequences. His greatest strength is his capacity for love, but that also becomes his weakness. This is what Aristotle would call his tragic flaw. Juliet begins as innocent and obedient, but love transforms her into a brave and independent woman. She defies her parents, society, and even death to be with Romeo. Her character grows throughout the play. Through her, William Shakespeare shows both courage and maturity beyond her age. Friar Lawrence represents wisdom and religion, but his plans fail because of human error and fate. The nurse is loyal and affectionate, but her simple advice often causes confusion. Mercutio, with his humor and wit, represents the joy and energy of youth. His death marks the moment when comedy turns into tragedy. Tybalt stands for anger and hatred. The prince represents law and order, but even he cannot stop the power of love and fate. Themes of Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. The first major theme is love. Shakespeare presents love in many forms: romantic, parental, and even spiritual. The love between Romeo and Juliet is idealistic and pure but also dangerous because it goes against the world around them. The second theme is fate. From the beginning, the lovers are described as star-crossed. Their destiny is controlled by forces beyond their will. Every attempt they make to escape fate only brings them closer to it. The third theme is conflict. The family feud shows how hatred destroys peace and happiness. The fight between the Montagues and Capulets symbolizes larger human conflicts, between generations, between love and duty, between peace and pride. Another theme is youth versus age. The young characters act with passion and speed. The older ones act with caution but also with rigidity. The tragedy shows what happens when understanding between generations is lost. The final theme is death. Death appears throughout the play, in dreams, in threats, in actions. But Shakespeare uses death not just as an end but as a transformation. Through their deaths, Romeo and Juliet achieve eternal unity. Style and language. Shakespeare wrote Romeo and Juliet mostly in iambic pentameter. It is a rhythm of 10 syllables per line with a pattern of unstressed and stressed beats. This gives the dialogue musical quality. He also used blank verse. It is unrhymed iambic pentameter for serious moments, and prose, or ordinary speech, for common characters. The play is rich in imagery and metaphor. For example, Juliet is often described as light in darkness. When Romeo first sees her, he says she teaches the torches to burn bright. This image shows love as illumination. Shakespeare also uses dramatic irony, which means the audience knows something that the characters do not. For example, we know Juliet is not really dead, but Romeo does not. This increases the emotional tension. His use of oxymoron, words with opposite meanings, also shows the confusion of love. Romeo speaks of a loving hate and a cold fire. These opposites express the complex emotions of love and conflict. Conclusion. Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare remains one of the most powerful tragedies ever written. It tells a story of young love that rises above hatred but is crushed by fate. Through its poetry, its emotion, and its humanity, the play continues to move audiences after more than 400 years. The tragedy is not only about two lovers but also about the world around them. It is about families that cannot forgive, society that values honor more than compassion, and fate that cannot be escaped. Shakespeare shows us that love is both beautiful and dangerous, both creative and destructive. In the end, the play teaches that reconciliation often comes too late. Peace arrives only after loss. But through their love, Romeo and Juliet achieve a kind of immortality. Their names live on as symbols of pure and passionate love that defied the darkness of hate.